And welcome to World Insight, coming to you live from Beijing on CCTV News. I'm your host, Tian Wei. On today's program, foreign ministers of China, Japan, and South Korea are set to meet this week in Tokyo amidst deepening tensions arising from territorial disputes and the U.S. missile defense system. Can the three sides overcome their differences? And a mystery hacking group called Shadow Brokers announced an auction of advanced cyber weapons after stealing them from the National Security Agency in the U.S. What does this mean? The rest of us. The foreign ministers of China, Japan, and South Korea are set to meet in Tokyo. Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi and his Japanese and South Korean counterparts also are going to have dinner on Tuesday before their formal talks on Wednesday. According to the Chinese Foreign Ministry, the top diplomats will reveal the progress of trilateral cooperation, discuss development direction, and also exchange views on regional and global issues.
Foreign ministers from China, Japan, and South Korea are gathering despite some recent dark clouds hanging over relations. The Chinese Foreign Ministry is hoping that the three parties can stabilize their relations and regional trade.
This is a
routine annual trilateral meeting on cooperation issues. We expect cooperation between China, Japan, and South Korea to continue to make progress after this meeting, enhancing integration in East Asia.
The meeting, established in 2007, is part of a mechanism for the three East Asian countries to pave the way for stronger cooperation, heads of state summits, and major regional and global issues. The annual China-Japan-South Korea foreign ministers meeting was resumed last year after diplomatic rifts led to a three-year suspension. Economy is at the top of the agenda. With China, Japan, and South Korea as key powers in Asia, cooperation among the three countries is an important driver of regional development. The three countries have held 10 rounds of FTA talks since negotiations started in 2012. During a trilateral summit, which Chinese Premier Li, South Korean President Park, and Japanese Prime Minister Abe attended last November, all sides agreed to speed up talks and aim for a comprehensive, high-level and mutually beneficial agreement. The talks come as tensions over territorial disputes have strained China-Japan ties, and the planned THAAD system deployment has divided China and South Korea. But China hopes this meeting will help maintain the momentum of cooperation among the three countries. Many have high hopes ministerial talks will help ease tensions and pave the way for the G20 summit meetings.
And for more on China, South Korea, and Japan foreign ministers meeting, here in Beijing, we are joined by Ms. Liu Yunyun, who is the Assistant Executive Editor of the Beijing Review. Welcome. And also in Washington, D.C., we are having Ms. Shihoko Goto, who is the Senior Northeast Asia Associate at the Woodrow Wilson Center's Asia Program. Welcome. Meanwhile, also joining us from Washington, D.C., we have Bobina Huang, who's a visiting professor at Georgetown University. She also served as Senior Special Advisor to the U.S. State Department. Ladies, I should say, this is really a panel of great ladies. Welcome to the three of you. Obviously, women are playing a bigger role in Northeast Asia. That should be congratulated. Having said that, though, how come it's so difficult for those gentlemen to raise a date even for a meeting among the three foreign ministers? Finally, they did. Congratulations. But it's been quite a difficult process. Ms. Huang, Professor Huang.
Well, I think that the issue right now is a focus perhaps too much on those issues that divide the three countries. These three countries have very much in common in terms of interests. And you mentioned that economy is certainly one of them, but also other areas of common concern, such as cooperation on environmental issues, for example. So I think the focus on common interests should be able to bring the three together.
How much common interest really is there, particularly when we are moving up to the G20 summit? We're likely to see or not see sometimes bilateral meetings or not. Ms. Goto.
I think what we really need to bear in mind is that there is a lot of concern about political conflict taking over the other interests. As the professor said earlier, there are a lot of interests of mutual concern to the three countries. And I really should point out, on the economic front, we are seeing, for instance, from the IMF, that there are considerable downside risks to the global economy. We are seeing Europe facing considerable challenges, not least because of the exodus of Britain from the European Union. We are seeing instability in the Middle East. The real bright spot in the global economy right now remains Asia, and especially in East Asia. And it is vital, not just for the region, but for the world, to ensure that these three countries work together. And there are challenges. Let's take, for instance, trade agreements. There are many challenges, but many opportunities as well, and we need to keep our eyes on the ball.
We need to really keep our eyes on the ball. We've been distracted for quite some time, I have to say. But Ms. Liu, given the sentiments that we had months ago and even over the past few years, is it easy that all capitals come together, particularly from Northeast Asia? As the other two ladies just indicated, these economies are extremely important these days.
Yes, of course, you're absolutely right, and I agree with them, because China and South Korea and Japan are actually working on their free agreements. For instance, the free trade agreements between the three countries, and also free trade agreements between ASEAN +3, +6. So we're also working toward the East Asia economic community, so which can be achieved by 2020. So actually, there are a lot of grounds that we can work on together, aside from those political confrontations.
But those political confrontations, or shall I say, at least the spar of words, does in a way influence the sentiment of discussion. That's why, in a way, these foreign ministers have such a difficult time even figuring out a meeting among the three of them. Professor Huang, how much vision, really, should politicians these days have? And how much, shall I say, understanding of the future they need to demonstrate this time? 20 summits among all the G20 leaders. Please, go ahead.
Well, I think there is an issue here. We talked about how the common interests of economic growth and so on is shared by the three countries. But let me point out that these political so-called distractions, these are not trivial, and they're actually quite related to the economic issues. Now, I disagree a bit with what Ms. Goto said earlier. I don't think East Asia is really the bright spot right now in the global economy. In fact, each of these three great economies are facing some very serious challenges internally. And the issue becomes if each one decides to pursue their own economic national interests, which then could come into conflict. And of course, it's very political, because each of these countries' leaders, unfortunately, and the publics are quite nationalistic. So I think the leaders have to understand that through cooperation, instead of promoting just self-national interests, in terms of economic growth, that it is better for all three countries.
But Professor Huang, if I could just follow up very lightly on what you have just said. When you said these three economies are having their problem, yes, they do. But the question is, any economy in the world these days, who doesn't?
That's exactly right, but this is the point of the G20 and why G20 is so important, because it brings together 20 of perhaps not the largest nations, but the most important nations, to try to say that cooperation in terms of national economic interests can produce global economic prosperity for all.
Right. And Ms. Goto, I want to further approach this in the direction that you have mentioned earlier. If there are problems, we seem to have some common problems, and yet in different circumstances. Structural reform, that's the common problem facing the three economies, South Korea, China, and Japan. Different stretch of time, of course, and different circumstances, but it's a common problem. Meanwhile, there's another common problem. How will this region trade with one another, given might be some distrust issues, given might be some geopolitical changes that might be with us for years and probably even decades to come. So the question is, can we have a bigger vision, and where would that come from? Ms. Goto.
Right. Well, I think that really hits nail on the head because it really brings home the fact that this meeting that's happening in Tokyo right now is very important. The three countries are now engaged in dialogue, and we shouldn't take that lightly because at the introduction we've heard that these meetings have been cancelled in the past over political tension, and there is also concern that this particular meeting may also be cancelled as well. So the fact that it is happening and the fact that the ministers from both China and Korea are willing and able to come to Tokyo is very much a step in the right direction, and hopefully it will lead to further dialogue and dialogue is the first step, of course, to greater understanding and hopefully to trust. Now, when we go to these common challenges that these three countries face, and you mentioned the whole idea of social change, the need for social change. What we have seen, for instance, in the success of an economic formula in these three countries have been about being able to meet the needs of expansion. So all three have really been export-led economies, manufacturing goods meeting demands of the global market at a cheaper cost. That formula has worked in the past, but it's not a formula that's going to work in the future, and therefore, can there be social changes that will be able to meet a more service-led economic growth?
I probably know more about China's approach than the other two economies. So if I understand right, and Ms. Liu, correct me if I'm wrong, it seems that China is trying to work on that by trying to expand the domestic market, to let its domestic market consume ever more than it used to be, so that there will be less trade frictions, there will be less conflicts with other trading nations as well. But of course, that's a process. So the question is now, during this process, what can be done? Can the G20 summit, also with the three foreign ministers meeting, provide some very basic framework or groundwork for that?
Well, I think that's exactly why the G20 meeting is so important, because it is actually a meeting trying to prevent a framework which can be agreed upon by leaders from developed economies and also by leaders from developing economies. And I cannot say in particular what we can achieve in this September.
Because we don't know. Even the foreign minister meeting could be such a challenge.
But we can draw from our past experiences. For instance, after the 2008, the financial crisis hit, and the G20 countries have actually worked together and to prevent this economic crisis from going into like a very catastrophe. So this is actually working.
Having said that, though, ladies, let's face the reality. I just want to do a reality check with all of you. Women are very good with reality checks, by the way. So may I just mention one part of it, that is the kinds of geopolitical thing that's going on still with us. For example, this year's drills between the United States and South Korea began on Monday for a 12-day run, largely computer-simulated war games. Training involved 25,000 U.S. troops and 50,000 South Korean soldiers, according to both militaries. China's news agency Xinhua said on Monday that the move could, as they say, quote, jeopardize peace and stability in Northeast Asia, and of course, and could lead to vicious cycle of violence for violence. That, of course, is a response to all the latest development on the Korean Peninsula. Professor Huang, of course, from the U.S. perspective, you are really an expert on the issue. So many tug of wars, at least in words, over the past few days and weeks on the issue. Korean Peninsula peace and stability, the big key part of where Northeast Asia is going and whether the economies could work well. So at this point, leading up to the G20, we're seeing still so many elements that likely to influence the result of G20 or the sentiment of the G20. How should we understand this?
Well, first of all, I don't think the issue on the Korean Peninsula should really affect the G20. Look, I actually very strongly disagree with this assessment of these current exercises that are now going on on the Korean Peninsula. First of all, these are not just U.S. South Korea. These also include 9 other countries of the Neutral Nations Supervisor Committee. This is all part of the UN forces that actually fought the war on the Korean Peninsula, ending in an armistice. So the exercises, the military exercises, are an annual event. They have gone on almost every single year since 1953. They are under the supervision of the Armistice Agreement, which was signed by the DPRK, by the way, and endorsed by the PRC. So, and there is zero correlation, and this has been proven from study to study, that shows that these exercises, despite what North Korea claims, and unfortunately supported by China, have not led to increase in provocation between North and South Korea.
All right.
Let's get to the point.
Okay.
The instability on the Korean Peninsula right now is due to North Korea's violation of international agreements and standards.
Professor Huang, you got your time. You got your time.
Nuclear weapons proliferation.
You got your time. Let's
Well,
have
I
Ms.
do
Liu.
have some disagreements with the lady, because something which is happening annually and regularly doesn't make it right. So if you're going to do the right thing, you have to stop this vicious cycle of trying to provoke another country. And for instance, we can all think outside the box. For instance, what if the U.S. Army, U.S. troops withdraw from Korean Peninsula or from Japan? And what if North Korea can allow IAEA nuclear investigators into the country and can work things out and can work for a denuclearization of this peninsula?
I can see you're very excited about your idea, and I can see Professor Huang keep on blinking her eyes, seem to questioning the possibility you have raised. But can you be more clear with us, Ms. Liu, when you are proposing these ideas? To what extent these ideas is about thinking out of the box? To what extent these ideas are actually wishful thinking at this critical time? What do you think?
Well, we can take a look at the history. When China and the United States established diplomatic relations, is that thinking out of the box? It is. When look at the United States, when it established this diplomatic relations with Cuba, is that thinking outside of the box?
Well, we're not going to discuss just China-U.S. relation. We'll leave it to another program because we're having limited time. So we still got Tokyo that has not been mentioned much. So let me, just to be fair, go to Ms. Goto for your further analysis. China, Japan, of course, we all know there have been a lot of disputes, disagreements as well. Now, the issue, as we mentioned earlier, is will this be an opportunity that disagreement geopolitically will give way to the very common interests of economic development? And will constituencies back at home be able to support that possibility? Ms. Goto.
Well, as you said, the common interest here is to ensure peace and stability. The unfortunate fact, though, is that conflict between Japan and China are manifold, not least over territorial disputes in the East China Sea, but it's also extended to territorial disputes in the South China Sea, insofar as, whilst Japan doesn't have any territorial claims in the South China Sea, it is very much a proponent of the latest decision by the international authorities to adhere to the existing rule of law. So there are philosophical challenges here in terms of what kind of rules should be prevail moving forward in the region, and I don't think Japan and China necessarily see eye to eye on that.
All right.
But I do know.
Go ahead. Sorry.
I was going to say, but I do know that no one wants to see these territorial disputes escalate any further, and certainly no one wants to see this result in any military conflict.
We only got 40 seconds left for three of you ladies, so every one of you, if you can, provide us with an expectation, realistic expectation, by the way, ladies, for the upcoming, before the G20. Let's just have some realistic expectation, at least for the ministers of the foreign ministers of three countries. What can they reach, at least that they can work on? Let's begin with Ms. Goto. 10 seconds for you.
If they can come up with a joint statement, a joint communique after this meeting, I think that would be heralded as a major breakthrough.
What should be in that
the
statement?
Doesn't matter. The fact that they've reached it.
What should be in that statement?
That they will meet again, and they will continue to engage in dialogue.
Okay. And Professor Huang, 10 seconds for you as well.
The G20, that meeting will be fine if they can focus on common economic interests. Let me just say that I agree with Ms. Goto, but I point out that it is not just Japan and China that are disagreeing. It is frankly the United States, South Korea, Japan, and many, many other nations of the world that are having issues with the principles behind some of Chinese actions.
All right, you got your accusations over there. Ms. Liu, what about you? Realistic expectation from you. You got your 10 seconds.
For the trilateral foreign ministers meeting, I think if they can agree to disagree, and that's a big progress.
All right.
Thank you.
We'll see, ladies, how things would evolve when those gentlemen, the foreign ministers of the three countries, will meet later this week. Ms. Liu Yunyuan, Ms. Shihoko Goto, and Ms. Lina Huang. Thank you so much, ladies, for being with us. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Stay with us here on World Insight. We got our final segment coming right up. A cryptic hacking group known as the Shadow Brokers are auctioning a set of sophisticated cyber weapons stolen from the National Security Agency. What could possibly go wrong? This is World Insight coming to you live from Beijing, and now we turn to cybersecurity. A mysterious online hacking group called the Shadow Brokers says it has stolen files linked to the U.S. National Security Agency. The stolen malware includes state cyber weapons. The NSA has been accused of running hacking operations in many countries, including Russia, China, and the UK, with their cyber weapons. Will these cyber weapons harm global cybersecurity? How would the leak affect international community? Before we move on to our discussion, take a look at this.
Shadow Brokers. The head of the organization, an 8-foot-tall alien which trades information in the video game Mass Effect 2, might just have become reality. Last week, a group called the Shadow Brokers claimed to have stolen a collection of malware files from the Equation Group, which are believed to be part of the U.S. National Security Agency, or NSA. Shadow Brokers posted on social media Tumblr to hold a Bitcoin auction and give access to the highest bidder. They've even offered samples of the files they stole. However, their Tumblr account has been deleted. Why the group chose to do this is a mystery, but some say the Shadow Brokers might not really be after money or unveiling the stolen data. Former US CIA employee Edward Snowden says it's a warning. Last year, international software security organization Kaspersky revealed that the Equation Group had established hundreds of back doors into the governments of Russia, China, Britain, Iran, and more. 42 countries in all had been penetrated. The files stolen this time include information about cyber weapons used by the NSA to hack others, and a tracking code that reveals the fingerprints of the NSA's malicious software. The data would expose the NSA's server flaws and also threaten the countries hacked by the NSA. For now, the Shadow Brokers remain hidden, and consequences for foreign policy are not yet clear. But one thing's for sure, global cybersecurity hangs in the balance.
And for more on NSA leaks, we are joined here at Beijing studio, Jay Huang, who is the founder of J-Stone Venture and former managing director of Intel China. Welcome, sir. Also joining us from Washington, D.C. in the U.S., we have Mr. Ernest McDuffie, who is the founder and CEO of the global McDuffie Group. So let me ask you first, Mr. McDuffie, does this latest development prove that the NSA has been hacking many other countries, including China, Russia, and some of the others?
Well, I don't know if proof is the right term. Few things are ever completely proven, but I mean, it's the job of the NSA to hack other countries around the world. So I don't even know if that's an issue.
All right. If that is not an issue, what about the next question? Does this mean that some of the U.S. tech companies, well knowing that there are backdoors to their existing system, still try to sell their products around the world? Because all of these secret codes seem to suggest that they can go into all these kind of hardwares and softwares.
Yeah, you know, the idea that U.S. software is riddled with backdoors that are controlled by NSA, I think is more an urban legend than a proven fact.
Which one, Mr. McDuffie, is the urban legend? Is that the tech companies have backdoors, the urban legend? Or the tech companies have backdoors and they are being controlled by the NSA is the so-called urban legend?
Well, I would say both, actually. I mean, any company that's doing business internationally, its entire reputation and business model is at stake. If they were ever proven or found out to actually have a backdoor, regardless of who was in control of that backdoor, that would be the end of that company's business existence. They'd have no reputation anymore at all. Companies work extremely hard to guarantee that their software does only what it says it's supposed to do. There's been talk for years about unsuspected collaborations between NSA and all types of companies, but I think recent history has shown that companies in the United States fight back against government control. The FBI trying to get the phone companies to release codes is a prime example of the kind of independence and fierce fight that private sector companies do against government agencies.
All right. Mr. Huang, I think Mr. McDuffie have already presented his view. So what about you? What do you think? Is the backdoor an issue with the U.S. tech companies? What has been the relations from your understanding between the government and those companies? And their products, of course.
What I have learned from U.S. internet and media about this and the latest incidents is the shadow brokers try to auction a software kit. And then that software kit and provide the tools how to hack into U.S. companies' devices. For example, Apple, Cisco, and even hardware and storage company. So Cisco come up to say whatever information in there, that's related to their older version of the hardware and the software. Nobody seems to come to deny this is not backdoor. So from what I read, this is a backdoor, a hacking backdoor, and provided by NSA. I think that this is a huge and risk for all the U.S. companies doing business and globally, because the Chinese government has long been suspected, and the U.S. companies, when they provide hardware or software, they may have willingly, unwillingly, some backdoors left in there. This latest incident seems to prove the Chinese suspicion may be right.
All right. Having said that, though, Mr. McDuffie, what about the latest revelation coming from the Snowden's tweets? From his tweets, he seemed to suggest to the public that once those secret codes appear on whichever computer, whether it's in China, in Russia, in the UK, elsewhere in the world, that means the NSA has been watching it. So, as a result, you have companies around the world now working very hard to check their computer systems to see whether these codes appear on their screen. And according to some of the latest media reports, we already know that some of the Chinese companies have found out they do have these problems. So these are facts already that out there. The question is, what would that mean, not only between the wars of governments? I mean, let's put that espionage thing aside. What would that mean for companies, for private individuals, and for also individual citizens around the world.
Yeah, absolutely. You're really touching on the right issues there. What's happening between professional intelligence agencies, I guarantee you, is not reflected in the information that we're seeing in the public. They're professional agencies, and they do their work
Not
really
all
well.
of them. Not all appeared in the public eyes, but maybe some from time to time being leaked to the public for one reason or the other. Of course, you could scrutinize them, but they still exist. But having said that, though, what about for the others? What does that mean?
So the things that I've seen about this recent incident kind of indicate, number one, that it's old. The timestamps on the material that Shadow Broker had exposed was dated 2013. Zero-day threats occur every day. Every day, private sector companies and private citizens around the world are under attack, primarily from criminal organizations, global criminal organizations, not affiliated with any country at all. And so that's your biggest threat in cyberspace. And you have to do, as a private citizen, as a private company, you have to constantly update, refresh, look at, analyze everything you can to mitigate attacks from cyberspace.
Right.
It really is kind of irrelevant, what the source is, because the attacks are going to come anyway and can be extremely damaging from a financial standpoint, intellectual property theft, and all manner of different issues. So that's the issue.
It is very dangerous for everybody. However, the reason why we focus so much on this piece of news is because the origin of these keys or codes that are being quote-unquote auctioned publicly by the shadow brokers have been accused from the NSA.
That's right.
And it seemed that the Snowden leaks, tweets this time, also reconfirmed the source of these keys and codes. So here's the issue, Mr. Huang. Whether it's NSA or other intelligence agencies by any government around the world, do they have the capabilities of protecting what they have as tools? If they don't, this is going to be a very dangerous spiral around the world that anyone can get hold of these keys and they can make such a splash in the world, and whoever going to auction them or buy them can make these access to all of these systems. What would that mean?
You're absolutely right. Supposedly, they should have the capability. Apparently, it seems NSA failed to protect their weapon. Let's just assume.
At least for now, at least in this case.
Exactly. Let's assume like all those government agencies are doing some whatever cyber attacking on each other, just as if each of them have a nuclear bomb in their hand. But at least you should protect your nuclear weapon. The arsenal should not be able easily get stolen by somebody, by whatever the criminal on the street. It appears on this case, the NSA didn't protect their nuclear arsenal very well, so they get auctioned on the, on the internet, which, really make people wondering, NSA spent so much money, the taxpayers' money, collect all those confidential information. It appears they didn't protect them very well.
Mr. McDuffie, I also want your comments on this because you used to work with the U.S. government and also now you work on the cybersecurity issue, providing consultancy to different kinds of players. What do you make of this potential danger that intelligence agencies not good at all with what they have got in hand, whether it's technology or it's the information they have collected from the public, quote unquote, legitimately?
Yeah, there is a danger. There are threats out there. In this particular case, I haven't seen any proof that NSA has been compromised. I mean, it's all speculation. Anything that Snowden says is years out of date and still just speculation. The samples of code that I've seen were analyzed by experts at universities in the United States, found them to be pretty poor examples of software engineering, not up to the standards of NSA for sure. And so, you know, that's all speculation. The part that's real is that your information is at risk when it's available via the internet, and it's at risk from people like you know, Amazon, major marketers, you know, manipulating what they want you to buy. They're at risk from criminals trying to steal your background. It's hard for me to imagine what China or North Korea or Russia or the United States would care about what's on my personal hard drive. You know, I don't worry about, you know, international, you know, spy agencies looking at me personally. But I mean, the capabilities have been out there for years.
Well,
you know, there's tools that have been around for years that allow people to attempt to, you know, break into other systems.
Well, you might not care at all, but there are many others in the world that they do care. They do want to have some privacy, right? And even though there could be tools out there for governments, for companies to break into individuals' eventual information, but that is going to violate the law. That is the issue here. It's not just about technology, it's also about privacy, it's also about how much space the society will leave to individual citizens, it's also about whether laws will be able to protect the citizens themselves. So, Mr. Huang, at this critical juncture, we've been hearing the Snowden case for a long time, but keep on having new information in relations to it. Of course, Snowden, the core of it, is about how NSA has been working and how he, as an individual, see that process. Having said that, though, is this a wake-up call this time with the shadow brokers and the NSA story? The shadow brokers, of course, is getting its sources from the Equation company. And back in 2015, we've already known a lab in Russia pointed out that the Equation company had been rather doing hacking practices back in the year 2001. That's all public information now being reported by the press. Whether it's true or not still need to be scrutinized. But all of this information put together, Mr. Huang, what does it mean for us?
I think it is a wake-up call. And unless if you live in the United States, like Mr. McDuffie, of course, if I were living there, I don't care about international and government and, you know, coming to steal my information. My major worry would be under the criminals and steal my information. That's natural. However, and for
when it's cross-border, though, it's
exactly,
a different story.
You know, for the Chinese government and then all the Chinese companies, if they buy their like router from Cisco and phones and from Apple and storage space from U.S. companies, it is a wake-up call
or
for
other
them.
companies coming from other countries,
exactly.
Also the same issue.
So it is a wake-up call for them. I also think it should be another wake-up call for NSA. And then what I read on the internet is somebody speculate, say, since it's so hard to penetrate NSA firewall, this could be another Snowden Jr. Or another person inside of NSA leaked it. So I think this should be...
Of course, these could be speculations.
Exactly.
We don't know the sources, so we cannot confirm.
It is a speculation, but it should be another wake-up call for NSA to make sure they protect their confidential information.
Right. So, Mr. McDuffie, there's several issues. How intelligence agencies should do their job. On the one hand, they do their job as assigned by their governments, intelligence agencies around the world, but at the same time, work well on their capabilities of protecting the information as they need, and also to protect their systems. I'm not just talking about NSA, but also intelligence agencies around the world. Is this a wake-up call? Secondly, what is the relations now between the governments, NSA of various forms in various countries, and the private citizens, their rights protections in terms of privacy? And also, what about the relations between the NSA's governments and could be criminal organizations? Nobody knows shadow brokers, who they are, what their nature, but what would the relations among these very three different players? Mr. McDuffie.
Well, that's a lot to unpack.
It's a lot.
I think you're. Yeah. Well, the point about the laws and protecting the citizens, clearly there's an issue there because the laws have difficulty keeping up with technology. We've also mentioned a number of times how difficult the attribution problem is in cyberspace. So for a law to have any effect, you have to be able to positively identify who the actors are and identify what the jurisdictions are that apply. Very difficult to do that in cyberspace. These incidents of the last couple of weeks constitute wake-up calls, because if your agency wasn't aware that it was under attack, and you worry about whether U.S. companies have software with backdoors in it. I worry about all companies, all software has the potential of backdoors in it. So it's not a geopolitical thing. It's a criminal, global criminal activity that is really at the root of the issue.
We only got 20 seconds left for you, Mr. Huang. Can you be a little bit economical with the time? So what's your analysis?
If I was a U.S. company executive, as I used to be, I would be worried about how this latest incident is going to impact my business in China, maybe other countries.
Very interesting case study we're having today. We'll see how things would evolve. But thank you so much for your perspectives and certainly your insider analysis, both of you. Ernest McDuffie from Washington, D.C., and Jay Huang joining us in Beijing. Really appreciate it. Thank you so much, gentlemen. And that is all the time we have for today. If you'd like to see more, visit our website. Just type in World Insight CCTV News into your search engine. You'll be able to find us, or you can also check out our YouTube channel. From me, Tian Wei, and everyone on the World Insight team, thanks for watching. Tune in again tomorrow for more insights from across China and around the world. Good night.